think we can begin. Good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Wilmette Zoning Board of Appeals. Ms. Randolph, will you, Ms. Lisa, please call the roll.
Mr. Colang.
Here.
Ms. Norick. Here. Mr. Pelleton.
Here.
Mr. Sermon.
Here.
Ms. Choke Urban.
Here.
Snyder.
Here. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you new to our proceedings, the purpose of this board is to hear evidence on applications for variances from our zoning ordinance and on applications for special use. Based upon the evidence we hear this evening, we will make recommendations to the Village Board of Trustees as to whether the applications that come before us this evening should be granted or denied. We will vote to recommend granting or denying each application for variation based on whether the application meets the standards of review set forth in section 5.4.f of our village ordinance. Application for special use will be considered based on whether the standards of review set forth in section 5.3.e of our village ordinance are met. The Village Board of Trustees will consider the recommendations we make this evening at their next regularly scheduled meeting on February 25. Our recommendations to the board are advisory only. The Village Board has final say on all applications we will make, and will make its own determination as to whether to grant or deny them. The Village Board is not legally bound by our recommendations. There's one small exception to this rule. If this board makes a negative recommendation with respect to an application, in order for the Village Board of Trustees to approve that application, a supermajority of 5 Village Board members must vote to approve it, rather than a simple majority of 4. Also, you should note that this board does not operate by majority vote. We must have at least 4 affirmative votes to approve an application at this board. Today we have 6 members present, so a vote of 4 to 2 affirmative would obviously be an approval. Ordinarily, in recognition of this unusual feature of our procedure in that we need a minimum of 4 affirmative votes, when we do not have all members present on a given evening, and today we have 6 out of 7, we give the applicants who are scheduled to come before us that night the option of requesting a continuance to the next available date on our schedule. The next available date for any applicant who would like to request a continuance this evening is February 19th. There's no penalty for asking for a continuance. No such request will be held against you when your case is eventually heard. If you wish to ask for a continuance, however, you must do so at the beginning of your presentation before making any substantive arguments as to the merits of your case. Please also be aware that if you request a continuance, there's no guarantee as to how many board members will be present on the evening to which your case has been continued. The cases we shall hear this evening will be heard in the order set forth on the pre-printed agenda located at the table near the door where you first came in. When your case is called, please proceed to the podium, state your name and address, and tell us exactly why your application meets the standards of review that are applicable to it. Each member of the board is a long-time resident of the village and has visited your property during the past week. In addition, we have received from the village these green booklets containing all written information that you have submitted in support of your application, as well as any other correspondence that the village has received. Accordingly, it is not necessary that you repeat what you have already stated in writing. Please just hit the high points with particular attention as to why you believe your application meets the standards of review. After the applicant has had a chance to speak, we will open the podium to others who wish to speak. Everyone will be permitted to have their say. that we would ask that you keep your comments as short and to the point as possible. After we have heard all oral presentations, I will close the evidence and the members of the board will discuss what they have heard and take a vote. Once the evidence is closed, no further testimony on an application may be offered. The only people entitled to speak during that part of the proceedings will be members of the board. This meeting is a legal proceeding, and all testimony tonight must be given under oath. If you are here planning to testify tonight, I would ask you to raise your right hand and be sworn. You swear or affirm that you will tell the truth in the testimony that you are about to give? If so, please say, I do. Ms. Roberts, please call our first case.
Our first case is 2019 Z44, 735 Leamington Avenue. This is a request for a 2.6-foot side yard setback variation, a 3.48-foot combined side yard setback variation, and a 6.15-foot rear yard setback variation to permit the construction of a one-story addition for a garage.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Herman Criollo, and I have been living in Wilmette for almost 3 years. I'm very happy to be here. And now we are basically requesting this variation because our contractor, or one of the contractors, recommended that it was more difficult to do it if we move a little bit back into the house because there is accumulation of water. So that was one of the reasons. Also, we have the wires of the electricity that if we were more toward the back, so it will be a little bit difficult. So, but one of the main concerns was the water concern, right? That they said that it was, since that's the lowest part of the land, so they said that there's accumulation of water there, and that it was their recommendation to try to move it a little bit forward toward the front of the house. And so based on that, well, we decided to appeal this variance, and hopefully we can build our garage that is very needed.
Do the neighbors have a similar water problem to the behind you and to the side?
Yeah, they have some accumulation of water also, but there are no garages, right? My neighbor doesn't have, two neighbors close to my house, right on the left, they don't have any buildings there, any garage.
So when there's a heavy rain, there's a ponding in the back of your property?
Yeah.
Water is standing?
Water standing, it takes at least 1 day to go down again. Mm-hmm.
So that is why that plus the utility easement is why you are requesting to locate the garage where you have proposed to
Yeah, that's correct. That's the other reason. And also, they told me that, they mentioned, I'm sorry, that if, I believe that the rule says that for a detached garage, in the back, I needed 25 feet of distance, right? So that was the reason why we decided to probably to make it a little bit wider, but a little bit shorter, okay? Because if we move it toward the front of the house, now the entrance, right, to maneuver into the garage, it was going to be a little bit more difficult. So if the garage was located a little bit more toward the back, because it was going to be shorter, right, but wider, we will have more possibilities, because that was one of the initial concerns, right? Well, at the beginning, that was our idea, to make it a detached. But then we comment especially the problem of the setback to the back of the house. That was one. And also they were concerned about how I was able to maneuver to enter the car, since the space in the front, it was shorter. So that's why we take the measurements, and we decided to do it with those measurements, basically 19 wide by 22.
That's fairly narrow, 19 feet for two cars.
Yeah, it is, but unfortunately there is no more space, right? We don't have more space, so balancing those things. So we decided, well, we're gonna try to see what the Board of Appeals think about this plan.
I assume that you're going to drive on the north side of the property to access the garage?
Correct, yeah.
And
we're gonna back
have
up.
a carport sort of...
Oh, no, yeah. That's gonna be, yeah, we need to remove that. We're not gonna have that construction that we have right now. It will be eliminated, because that was one of the...
And that would leave you with, there's a measurement here on the drawing, but that's actually to the property line of 10 feet, 3 inches or 0.3, and 10 and a half, a little further back.
Right.
But the driveway, as it currently exists, it's less than 9 feet wide, about 8 feet 10 inches by my measurement. That's very tight. As a matter of fact, we heard a case 2 weeks ago where they were asking for relief because they didn't believe that an 8-foot driveway was near enough to get a car in and out of their property safely. Do you plan to add additional concrete? You have a lot of concrete already. Do you plan to widen the driveway?
Well, I mean, our cars are small. We don't have big trucks or anything. Actually, we have small cars, right? And I mean, sometimes we move our car and we haven't had any concern. But actually, my wife is the one that sometimes moves the car. Because we cannot put more concrete, right? Because we are already right. So our plan is just to move back and forth in the same direction.
Okay.
So if possible.
Yeah, and you also have an exit door, your back door.
Yeah.
It leads out onto that. There's no stoop, no step or anything. Generally, and Mr. Sermon could talk about this more better than I, but you don't want a door opening out onto what is effectively a road. Granted, it's you and your wife or whomever who might be driving on the driveway, but you don't want anybody stepping out into the path of a moving car.
I see.
That's the condition that you're going to be creating here. So I have a concern about that. I'm not sure if you've thought about that at all, or if you haven't.
Well, not in reality. I never thought it was going to be a concern, right? I mean, we don't have babies at home. We don't have. Of course, I know that always there is some risk, right? But basically, I have 2 kids, right? We have 2 kids that are 21 and 15, right? Now that I see what you are referring to.
Excuse me, Lisa, I have a question for you. They can't push the garage further back, correct? Because
That would require more of a variance?
Yes, that would require more of a
More of a
variance for the
variance.
rear yard.
So I think what they proposed is a reasonable solution for a 2-car garage.
That's correct.
And I think it looks like you have adequate space to turn your cars around. So, and I think, if you went further to the back, it would cause more impervious surface, so.
If I move the garage
And I
backwards,
think your side door that Mr. Pendleton was referring to was that the entry door, the existing entry?
The entry door, yeah.
Okay. Does that door swings in, correct? There's probably a storm door.
Exactly, yeah. The door
Yeah.
swings in. It's the storm door
Yeah.
that is the one that opens
I'd
out.
say that's common when you have a tight driveway, and I think the width is acceptable. A typical parking space is 9 feet, so if you're a little less. They may have been more concerned at that lakefront property because of the house and the wall on the other side of hitting it, but here, you can, you don't have that same condition. So I think it's fairly straightforward. I don't know what other members have to say.
I would agree. I think that you've come up with a very modest request of the board in terms of the side yard setbacks on a tight lot. And I don't know what the size of a standard garage is, but what you're proposing is not the standard size in my book. I could support this. It's a modest request, and it gives the family a 2-car garage when it currently doesn't have one, so.
Yeah, thank you.
I have no further comment.
No questions for the applicant? Comments? Thank you very much. You can,
Thank you.
let's see. Now, is there anyone that wants to speak regarding this application? Seeing no one, can we have?
I'll make a motion. I move to recommend granting a request
Give
for...
it a second, sorry.
Oh.
Second.
Sorry.
Mr. Colang, second. Go ahead.
I move to recommend granting a request for a 2.6 side yard setback, a 3.48 combined yard setback, a 6.15 rear yard setback to permit the construction of a 1-story addition for the garage at 733 Leamington Avenue in accordance with the plan submitted. As I mentioned, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it's a good solution. And, that area you're in, really, it's mainly carports, so I think to have a garage will be very helpful. I notice most of your shovels and bicycles and everything are just outside right now, so I can support it.
I think the overall, first of all, I think, the village is in favor of getting 2-car garages where they fit. This is a pretty tight fit. As far as the stoop goes, I don't know if you could even put one there and get a car through, so I think you'd have to leave it the way it is if you were going to. And their cars are pulling through right now into the back parking spots, so I don't see that as an issue. I think given kind of the village's preference for garages, getting cars off the street, the modest requirement here, I think it meets the standards of review, and I could support it.
I can support the project, too.
Up and down the street, there are not many garages, and the few garages that there are, some of them, I don't know how they can access 2 cars. I don't think they have room to maneuver. In terms of getting cars off the street, you do have an additional pad. I noticed you have 2 cars parked in that pad in the front, so you technically have room to get cars off the street, but not under cover. As I looked at this and discussed it with Ms. Roberts, but for the easement in the back and possibly aggravating a water situation back there, you could have moved the garage all the way to the rear with 3 feet on the back and 3 feet from the side and be within the rear yard setback. But that might create problems that for the relatively small variation request, I don't think we want to aggravate a situation that you are facing now. So I can also approve it. Please call it.
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Mr. Colang,
Yes.
Ms. Norick. Yes. Mr. Pelleton,
Yes.
Ms. Joker Urban,
Yes.
Chairman Schneider.
Yes. So that will go with a positive recommendation, and then the village board will meet on the 25th, I believe, so you want to be there. They may have some questions for you. If you please could come up, and thank you. Thank you.
To authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the Zoning Board of Appeals for case number 2019,
Second.
Z44.
All in favor?
Aye.
Call the next case, please.
Our next case is 2020 Z3, 3527 Greenwood Avenue. This is a request for a 7.14-foot front yard setback variation, a 6.72-foot front yard porch setback variation, a 4.72-foot front yard porch step setback variation, a 176.56 square foot front yard impervious surface coverage variation, and a 29.54 square foot front porch coverage variation to permit the construction of a substantial addition and remodel that is classified as a new home.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Apologies for such a long-winded request for variations, but this was been...
Could you state your name and address?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm the architect for this project, Greg Gislicki. My company, OCGG Architects, has been retained by my client, Andrew Sushko, and we have been presented with a program for an addition to the residence as well as a porch. And I have looked at this in several different ways of how to kind of compose this whole architectural arrangement. And the stumbling block was the location of the residence. And it was already past the front setback because of the established front yard regulations, as well as trying to keep the addition itself volumetrically pleasing and not overwhelming. And if we're very concerned with the bulk. And as a side note that's not at all relevant to this discussion, I'm on the zoning board in a different municipality, so I'm very sensitive to these issues, as well as I have been practicing since 2001. I have done several projects in Wilmette, and we never really came up with a situation where we had to present for a variation. So in a way, that was my always kind of personal professional effort, how to fit into the regulations of any municipality. So that being aside, you can. I'm saying this so you can see the mind frame, the mindset or the frame of mind of how we have approached this project. I could explain it from two sides, perhaps from an architectural point of view. Why is it that this addition is created in such a way? Or I can just make a list and run down the list of regulations that we're seeking relief for, but maybe. I'll present it as a project, and you ask me how come we have decided to ask for one relief as opposed to another. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a created structure that is going to stand there in one shape or another in the neighborhood for quite a few years to come. So obviously, it's going to have an impact on the neighborhood. So to start off with, we try to ameliorate the situation by creating as pleasing of a piece of architecture as possible, as well as eliminate the volume or the bulk of the house. Also, my client requested for a porch, and that immediately put us over a setback. As well as the porch, you may ask why the porch is in a certain proportions. The dimension of 6 feet is really kind of a reasonable dimension for depth in order for this porch to work as a porch, as well as the width to kind of, if you look at the outside of the home, which is the last page with the 3D graphics.
If you want, you can move that shelf out, and we can put it up on the screen.
Oh, okay. And it is...
The button on the side there.
Oh, okay.
Just pull that out.
There you go. So the attempt... I need to do this. So attempt was, as you can tell from the graphic, is to minimize the volume of the home. That's why I went with the bungalow look, which is also very compatible with quite a few structures, historical structures in the neighborhood, and in Wilmette itself. Not so much in the neighborhood, however, in the general municipality. The front porch is kind of squeezed in terms of the width. It's not the full width of the house, but it's proportioned to work with the two dormers. As well as it will create, because it's a house with a detached garage, coming and going from the home, it also helps to park the car, get into the residence, and go through the front door. There's also a small porch in the back, and the reason for that is to alleviate the concern of kind of stepping into the driveway, which you had concern with the previous request. And I've also created a graphic of what the setback would cause if we would attempt a different project. As you can tell, the setback is going through the first third of the home. And in order to do any kind of addition to take advantage of the built structure, we would have to somehow go to the back and build the residence on partial of the volume of the home. And I've created this graphic to sort of give you a better idea, understanding of what it is that this setback would make us do if we adhere to all the regulations for the setback requirements. As well as going through the floor plan of the residence, this is the existing line of the residence. So essentially it would be cutting off a large slice of the project if we just did a second floor addition. If we did that, we would still have to ask for a variance. So I hope you can see that we were left with very few options of how to create this project without requesting a variation. Also, in terms of the impervious coverage, this is classified as a new home, but the addition to the back is roughly 14 feet by the width. I think, let me look at the survey to be exact. It's 30 feet by 14 feet roughly is the addition on the back. So we tried again to minimize the added footprint to the coverage. So the only limitation, the only variation for the coverage we're asking for is for the porch, and for the small area because of the stoop. So that's all I have for you at the moment, and I'm sure you have quite a few questions, and I sort of left it purposely there so I can answer them as you would like to have them answered.
Question, what will remain of the existing house?
Foundations, first floor outline, and the second floor addition will be kind of a taller roof. I would say it's a half story with a couple of dormers on the front and the back.
So basically, the basement walls and the first floor exterior walls,
yes.
Everything else will be demolished.
Yes, and it's part of the program. We tried several different options, and some of it is, I don't mean to, it's a smile, not a smirk, because I kind of remember going through all these options of pricing with any builder, and it's always the same thing, or often it's the same thing. If you just take everything out and start from scratch, it's a much more cost-effective way of approaching it. This home is a early post-war structure. There really isn't that much in the plan that's compatible with today's requirements. Hence, we are keeping the stair going down to the basement, or a portion of it, or trying to kind of the way the basement is organized. So lo and behold, the basement floor plan changes very little from the previous plans. So it's really the stair that's affecting it, but nothing else. Also, the downstairs, the kitchen is very small. The way the spaces are arranged, the front door is sort of on center, but not really. Then there's a set of bedrooms to the left, which is to the east. So no matter how we did this, it was not a Rubik's Cube where it looks good at the end when it's all put together. It's really more of a hodgepodge of things. So
It will also, am I correct, that basically the two-thirds of the rear wall, first floor wall, will also be taken out?
At the back, yes. And that's for the family room to be created.
Right. And I presume some of the penetrations in the existing first floor perimeter walls will also be changed.
Yes.
With the double door and the
That's right.
leading to the porch.
Yes, and that's the aesthetics. I'm sure you've seen other many projects in many locations where not keeping the existing openings does not play well with the project itself. So I think it's a very, it's a move that's not a budget move. However, it has a very long-lasting effect on the pleasing, temperament of the home. Let's call it this way.
Let me ask you this question. Now, I've asked this several times when we have had a similar situation. the cost thing, and you are very
Yes.
familiar with costs. If you started with a blank piece of land and did this building,
Yes.
how would it compare in terms of cost to what you're doing here?
Okay. Okay, this can be answered in several different ways. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of already giving kind of a qualifying statement, but it comes with a certain set of clients. So from my past experience, we've been doing this since 2000. I've been on my own, or my office. So I kind of call the office personally because I'm sort of, I'm doing everything I can in order to make it work. But for example, if it's a new residence, usually it's very seldom as the same resident in the location. It's usually a house that's sold, and a new set of neighbors or residents are coming in, and their requirements are usually very different than someone that lives in the residence and asks for a new home. So for example, we had a couple projects where people residing in the place would take the house down and build a new one. However, that comes with certain different financing regulations. That means they either have to have the money for building it, but in order to take down a residence means to pay off the mortgage. Paying off the mortgage has its own set of rules and regulations because one cannot demolish the house to nothing without being foreclosed on. I'm sorry, I'm going into very much in this kind of technical side of it, but it's very relevant to your question. And then if, for example, if residents who comes in to buy the lot, if they're really looking at this as a piece of land and not a property of a home, it's just something to be demolished and something you created. The neighborhood itself has a very few good examples, I would say good in a negative sort of way, of what can happen with their approach. And there's quite a few houses that don't really fit the size or the kind of character or even the sort of, it doesn't have to be the same kind of complementary design architecturally, but the proportions really should work somehow well with the area. So I've answered your question in a very long way. And where does the price come in? If a new house is being built, it never really gets built at the size. It goes for the maximum of what the lot is allowing. And I've done one at 503 Park. That's for a client. And that's very close to maximum. I mean, we've been coming and going with the building department, with Rachel Randolph, over and over again, trying to make it fit. And that's by my client's request. We've done 1518 Wilmette Avenue. That's that white house from the bungalow. And that was a big attempt, a major attempt to try to keep it again in scale and not to make it overwhelming. That thing also went for the maximum. The two things that these properties have in common, there are people that bought the house that didn't live in the house, or so on and so forth. So yes, it's a very long-winded question, but in terms of the residents in this home, it's really kind of the reasonable prudent expense. So no matter what, it's still less money than building a new home, and the financing is very different. So apologies for a long answer, but I hope it's...
So what you're saying is the existing owner is going to be staying there
Yes.
because they want to make these changes.
That's
They have
right.
a mortgage, and that creates issues in
That is correct.
knocking everything down.
Yeah, that is correct.
Can they keep the existing financing in place?
I'm sorry?
Can they keep the existing financing in place?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But aren't they going to need, how will they finance the construction?
That's something that will be taken care of, but I don't need to be privy in detail to that.
I got it.
I don't believe we usually consider financial issues as a zoning
Yes.
board. So my concern, getting to the point is, your house, the property, the house is out further than anybody else on the side of
Yes.
that block. They're all modest-sized houses. So I guess I don't see a hardship that you need to have all of this in front, especially when you're tearing off the back of the house. So
Okay.
there's no reason that it shouldn't try to comply more with the codes than what's
Okay.
proposed. I'm an architect. I think the
Yes.
design is very nice, and I understand why you did it all, but I guess, to say you're going to come out, I mean, right now, from the lot line to the face of the building, it's 19 feet. I mean, that's very close for a Wilmette home to be. I mean,
Yes.
that's one car length. And, I guess when I look at it, I would have thought that you would have come back. You can't do anything about the first floor, but the first floor might have had an angled roof on it going back to reduce the bulk of the house. You know, it's already a small street, crazy because it's next to Loyola with all the people that park their cars on all the driveways.
Yeah, it gets busy
And
there.
now
during
you're
the-
just,
yes.
you're just bringing that, you know, you're going beyond what the context of the street is and bringing the property out. So I think, you know, if you are doing the type of renovation you're doing, I understand that you want to keep that front
Yes.
wall that faces to the north. But I would think you'd slope it there, and, you know, the porch looks great, but, you know, there's no hardship that you need to have a porch that's the full length.
But the
And
porch
that's
is
what
over
I-
setback.
Pardon me?
But the porch is already over setback, so we need to ask for variation to receive a porch.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying. It's tough for us. We have to look at it and see what you're proposing, and are there any other opportunities to change it, to eliminate or reduce the amount of the variation.
I hear you.
So right now,
yes.
you know, right now, I'm speaking for myself, it would be a tough sell to sell this the way it is, because you're asking for a lot. You're asking to go in front of the lot line of these houses that only have a 25, is it 25? 24.10 foot setback. You're already out quite a ways, and then you're asking for, you know, another, here's, I didn't do the math, but another 6 feet beyond that, plus the second floor, you want to go fairly straight up.
With the two
So-
front dormers, yes, yes.
So we have to look at it. If you're already
Sure.
expanding to the back of the home, it would seem that you could, there's the opportunity to shift the mass that way.
I agree with you 100%. However, if the client is asking for a front porch, there's not a way I can present it but ask you for a front porch. If we don't receive a front porch, then we have a different conversation with the client.
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's
until that
why-
happens,
That's why you're here, yeah.
yes, until that happens, I cannot recommend the client that, hey, forget the porch, there's no other option. The other option is talk to you and do my best to convince you to have a porch. However, adding a porch to the volume of the home is always a very pleasing effect.
Well, we understand
Because
that.
we can
know
ask for the,
this, yeah.
yes, because we can ask for the straight wall going up, and then structurally, I have all the reasons to ask for that. So then you end up with a larger volume over it, and it's a totally different level of conversation. So it's one of those things. I know it's careful what you ask for, you might get it, but at the same time, I'm kind of creating a project where I'm trying to minimize the effect of the volume. At the same time, not deprive my client from something they can have with a property, like-kinded property, which is a porch.
Yeah.
So I hope you see my point of reasoning.
No, I understand. I completely understand that. We just
Yes.
are what we're told by
I hear.
the village board is we're supposed to reduce the size of
Yes.
the variations if we feel that they're not appropriate. And if there are other opportunities, we should recommend those.
I mean, this is considered new construction, so basically, you know, if this was a blank piece of land and you came and asked for what you want, asked for this, there's no way you'd get it.
Oh, yeah, I understand that.
Right, so,
Yes.
and you're coming out farther, there's
Yes.
more room in the back, you could do things differently.
Okay.
We're saying, is there ways to minimize what you're asking for?
Okay,
Because
yes.
You may be getting the sense that what you're asking for isn't going to fly, or
Well,
doesn't
I'm not,
appear that it's going to fly.
I don't know until I know. So, of course, so this is the situation. If I go to the back, I am digging out quite a bit. Anyone that's involved in construction right now knows that the moment we're digging into a larger piece of land, we're spending a lot more money proportionally than if we're going up.
Would it just, sorry to interrupt, would it just be slab on grade, or would you?
No, it's slab on grade, the house is elevated, so no matter what,
Oh.
by default, we need to dig. So by digging,
Put in you'd have to put in
Yes,
footings
exactly.
and joists across.
Yes,
you
mhm.
know.
yeah, so if we do an addition on the back, not only will I cover more in order to satisfy the program, so it will be past the point where what the porch is right now, it's an optimal solution in terms of math. It's a decent solution in terms of architecture, and I'm sure that it's a very subjective way of looking at it because every architect would like to have a different solution. However, kind of giving all the bits and pieces, it's an optimal way to solve this program. And then in order, for example, to satisfy the square footage, we can add a lot more to the back because we can. And that means more coverage. So no matter what we do, there's always a negative and a positive. The positive, we don't have to go out in front. We are going out in front with a porch. So there's some trade-offs.
But I guess what you're doing, you're designed to take a look at the big picture, is your property is going to affect the character of that neighborhood.
Yes, I do.
And then it could cause all the other neighbors to say, hey, if he did it, we look at each case
Yes.
individually. There's no precedent set on any of the projects. We look at them individually.
Yeah.
But you're talking about changing the character of the neighborhood, which already has a crowded feeling to it. From an architectural standpoint, I completely understand it, but from a zoning standpoint, there's not a real hardships. Hardships are, when the property is so tight, or there's, we just want to put an addition on to make the family room bigger, and this is the only way we can go. That we can get our heads around. But when you say you're going to gut all the walls on the inside, except for the basement stairs, you have a lot of opportunities to make a lot of changes. So,
Okay.
I've spoken enough. I'd like other members to talk.
It appears like you are adding this 1.5-story addition across maybe 2/3 of the rear.
Yes.
So you're already going to be putting footings or basement below that, right?
There's an addition that's roughly 14 feet by 27 feet to the back. Where you see the family room over here?
Yeah.
That's very much a good portion of it is an addition.
Yeah, I'm looking at this
Yes.
drawing, and so I have a difficult time understanding why going all the way across, you could build out further in the back without too much additional cost, given the fact that you're already putting an addition back there. I like the
yes,
design.
yes.
I have to say that. And I am a big advocate of porches. And I come from an area where it's considerably warmer and people don't enclose their porches the way they do here. And I do like it. Every other house is in line with this one until and unless you add on the front porch.
Yes.
I'm not real keen on that.
I would agree with what both members have already said. I was struck as I drove through the neighborhood that there's not another house on that street that has a front porch. And the front porch not only encroaches on the front yard setback, but it adds the impervious surface. It adds to that, and by a significant amount. You're asking for 176 square feet, and the front porch measures 240 square feet. So you could do away with one variation just by reining that in.
Okay.
I also like the design of the house, and I would agree that the size of the homes in the area are small and make it difficult for families in this day and age, but I don't see the hardship on the front porch.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I have a different opinion, but I respect your opinion, of course.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
I think you
Yes.
can sense from the
Yes.
discussion here that the front porch is an issue.
Yes.
And so we are not asking, I don't think anybody's asking you to move the east wall of the house back to be in compliance. That
Yes.
clearly would not be economical.
Or the north wall.
North wall.
Is it the north wall?
Yes. It's the north one, yes.
The one facing the street.
Yes,
Yes.
sorry. But the porch is
Yes.
something that you are creating, you're self-creating
Yes.
the variation, or one of the key variations that we don't consider a hardship. And so you should be prepared that,
Sure. Let me ask you, can I ask you a question?
sure,
Because it's by default of this property by default, any solution that my client has entertained would have put us back in front of you anyway. So for example, with the second floor addition, no matter what we do with this project, it will be a variation. Now, the regulations of variations, I'm not sure how you work here, because if I don't receive this variation, I cannot show up for an extended period of time. So that means I need to do some horse trading here on behalf of my client. So this is that portion that I'm concerned about.
The second floor that you propose does not add or detract from the variations, am I correct?
No, that needs a variation.
Yes, it does.
It does, where it's over the lot line over.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That the house is non-conforming.
Yes.
I have a question for Ms. Roberts. So if we don't make a motion, we don't vote on this, then it has not been rejected?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And would he then be able to come back with a revised plan?
You could continue.
Right, yeah, I would
Yes.
suggest continuing
This
it,
is-
or if you
yes.
want to, we can not continue it, and you can come back when you're ready and renotice.
Yes. I mean, this is why I'm asking this. Otherwise, I'm putting my client at a distinct disadvantage. I hope you can see it. And it's not by my creation or my willingness. So, for example, if we are going to, let's say, here, listen to your recommendations and take them into the account and create the best of what we can, then my client can evaluate what's in front of them, and we can come back and present an appropriate solution that we think might be a very decent compromise. Definition of compromise is what it is, so we can do the best we can to reasonably satisfy all parties involved.
Yeah, a continuance would give you an opportunity to work with your client to
Yeah. Mhm.
develop what you want us then to
Exactly.
vote on.
Yeah, so that's hence the second part of the question. I apologize that I kind of don't let you almost finish and you went
Consensus,
to,
and
yes.
my colleagues can correct me, is that the issue is the porch.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, and so that is something you can take to your, maybe, and my colleague shouldn't, is the issue also the second floor addition that requires a variation because it is beyond the line? Is that also an issue?
For me, much less so, because the existing wall is there, and that's in line with all of the other houses on the block. I understood Mr. Sermon's design suggestion, which is essentially keeping the existing roof line, and you can have the second floor addition start back beyond the setback. But those are design questions, for you and your client to figure out.
I am not concerned about the second floor.
Okay.
The existing house is non-conforming, and that is a hardship. It was not created by the current owner. And I understand the desire to go up and create more space for the family. But I think you're exacerbating the situation by adding a 6-foot porch that spans the entire front of the house.
So I think when you look at this block, I mean, they're all one-story homes, but in the backyard, you have a couple of huge
Yes.
houses, which
Yes.
wasn't on the board whenever those were approved, but which don't really seem to fit the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
This is obviously a nice compromise to
Yes.
not have something like that there.
So,
Also, I forgot one thing that's quite relevant to this submission. There's a beautiful tree on the back lot. If I went farther than I did on this addition, I would go past its root line, which is where the canopy of the tree is. So there's another attempt why this addition is where it's at. So again, it's so many different things are affecting us. So let's say the porch is one factor, but everything else is also kind of combining it.
I think you've heard from most of
Yes.
us here that the porch is the issue.
Okay.
I think that the other things are, so as you meet with your client now, what options does the applicant have? Can he?
So we would want to continue you to a specific date so you don't have to redo notice.
Yes, that would be preferable. It's the less upheaval, the better.
Upcoming dates that we have are February 19, which is our next meeting, but we would need stuff next week, so that might be too
That's
soon.
tough.
Yeah. We have March 4th is open, and that would, we'd be looking for stuff like the 24th of February.
I can do that.
Okay.
All right.
24th of February,
Yes.
No, March 4th.
March 4th, okay.
Move to continue case number 2020Z-03 until March 4th, 2020.
Second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I think you have enough guidance from the,
Oh, yes, I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
I like the drawings and appreciate the bold line showing where the setback is.
Yeah,
It's very helpful.
And I
Thank you.
like the design very much as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on your seat someplace else, and I see, for me, it's like, how do I present this in order to make this somehow legible or coherent? So that's always the challenge. Thank you. I appreciate it.
next case, please.
Oh, wait, did we
Oh, no,
read that? Did somebody read that and I missed it?
no, we just continued the case.
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to prepare. Never mind.
Problem.
Our next case is 2019 Z35, 1 Indian Hill Road. This is a revised request for variation to permit the expansion of legal non-conforming uses, a club and a golf course, a 25-foot north side yard adjoining a street setback variation, a 30-foot rear yard of a double frontage lot setback variation, a 41.37-foot north side yard adjoining a street setback variation, a special use for 3 accessory buildings, each in excess of 200 square feet, a 2,028.25 square foot south side yard adjoining a street impervious surface coverage variation, a 2,631.1 square foot north side yard adjoining a street impervious surface coverage variation, a 2-foot fence height variation, and a fence openness variation to permit the construction of a 1-story employee center, a 1-story equipment wash building, parking lot, and other site improvements.
It's a mouthful.
Good morning, welcome.
Good evening. My name is John Talty. I'm with OKW Architects. My address is 600 West Jackson Boulevard, Chicago, Illinois. So we were together on November 20th and listened to what everyone had to say. Before we get into this, number one, I put a revised package in front of everybody. You had this information, but for the second sheet, which is a graphic which I think will help better explain what it is we have done so that we can all understand this a little bit more clearly. But let's take one step back quickly. We're here because Indian Hill Club is in need of improvements to the maintenance facility that they have. The stewardship and management of a 130-acre plus adjacent golf course has changed a great deal in the last 60 years since the existing maintenance facility was built. And as a result, we're asking for variances to allow us the opportunity to build 2 new buildings on this site. One is an employee center, for lack of a better term. The other is an environmental building, which I'll walk you through as well. And in the course of this exercise, we were asking for variances relative to setbacks, building heights, and impervious surface issues. So when we were last together, our site plan addressed these buildings with setbacks with the buildings located within the setbacks. So let me walk you through this kind of general understanding of where we have come since we last met, and then we'll get into some of the specifics, and I'll answer any questions that you may have. Number one, relative to the building heights, let's get that out of the way because that's a simple one. We've reduced the building heights to 15 feet, so they're in compliance, the new buildings. They're no longer, they're flat. The environmental building, which sits to the north, has a slight pitch to it, but the employee center, which sits to the south, is now a flat roof building that sheds water west to east. or east to west, I'm sorry, and it will be captured on the back side. So we don't have an issue regarding building heights any longer. The employee center, which is in blue here, was formerly was located within the side yard setbacks. And understand one of the things that adds to the complexity of this ask and this site is that, one, it's non-conforming within a residential community, and we're very sensitive to that. But two, it's an unusual site in that it's surrounded on all four sides by streets. So we have an unusual set of circumstances relative to setbacks. The front yard is actually on Hunter, and it's a 40-yard setback required there. The rear yard is on Indian Hill Road to the west, and then, which is a 50-foot setback. And then we have side yard adjacent street setbacks of 50 feet as well. So what is a 2-acre site is encumbered by robust setbacks in all directions. But we have moved that employee center within the setbacks of 50 feet from the west and 50 feet from the south, so we now comply within the building envelope allowed per the zoning of the property. In doing that, one of the things that we also addressed was a parking scenario that we had. We reoriented the parking lot in a different direction. Currently, all the cars park along the southern property line here, the fence line, with the headlights pointing south. And in restudying the site plan, we reoriented the lot so that the car lights head both in the east and west direction, away from the neighbors to the south across from Kenilworth Avenue. The equipment building to the north used to comply. That was within the 50-foot setback. That now is pushed into the setback as part of a conversation that we had, and I think we collectively understood that there's really, it's not affecting anyone on the north side of the property. The only thing that's affected is really the golf course. We had to move it into that setback because we need the real estate fundamentally in the middle portion of the site for vehicular movement, accessing all of the materials that are stored in these bins, the equipment wash that maneuvers through this portion of the building, and then access to the sand storage. That brings up another point. The last time we were together, there was a sand silo on this site that was quite tall. The sand silo has been removed. The equipment building grew in an east-west direction a bit to add another bay to accommodate interior sand storage, which will be accessed via an overhead door. So those are the primary changes that we've made to the property in an attempt to better conform to the requirements of the village and to demonstrate our want to get this taken care of and get it approved.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
So on the pad where the two dumpsters are going to be, did that move? Was that?
We did move.
You moved it west?
We moved that west.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that pad for a second. There currently are dumpsters on the site.
Right.
And they sit atop soil. By placing them on an impervious surface, it really allows for the cleanup to be to function in a much better way, and it allows for the movement of those dumpsters and the replacement of those dumpsters to occur without tearing everything up around it. That's the point of that.
Okay. I want to say overall, I think you were very responsive to with your new plan.
Oh, thank
to what
you.
you heard last time. I think, one of the areas I'd like you to hit on yet is kind of the exterior perimeter screening and foliage and things like that, what you're planning on that?
Around the perimeter of outside the fence line or inside the fence line?
Outside.
I think if you want to put this on the overhead, this is, you probably got a copy. It's from one of the neighbors, and it just shows beyond the fence, I think is what you're talking about, John?
Oh, I see.
You're talking about outside the property, right? In the parkway.
Here, there's
Yeah.
an exhibit.
I have to congratulate you, too. You guys really listened well, and I really think the new solution is very good.
Well, I think we can all agree it's a complicated piece of property, and this is the Kenilworth Avenue elevation across the bottom here. This is the image that was provided by one of the neighbors. We had a meeting on Monday night with the Architectural Review Committee, and we addressed the issues of the buildings and all the rest of it. One of the subjects that came up was the landscape. Landscape in both, I think it's fundamentally the landscape inside the site and what we're doing to address that, and what we're doing to address the needs of the neighbors. Both on the Kenilworth Avenue side and the Nelsons immediately to the east. And historically, and I think we talked about this, the club has, this is club prop, this isn't Parkway as it sits today. It's not Village of Wilmette Parkway, it's club property.
Okay.
Because if you remember, we had the issue of the property line today goes to the center line of Kenilworth Avenue. It's an unusual circumstance. It's the only property like that that's remaining. Mm-hmm. And so if this project were to move ahead, the 33 feet from the center line of Wilmette Avenue fundamentally to that fence line becomes Village of Wilmette property. The club would bestow that back to the village. Currently, the club is paying taxes on that to the center line of the road. So this property, or this parcel is club property. We have, in 2017, the fence was replaced. In 2016 or 17, I can't remember which, these pines were planted along this elevation to help mask the site from the neighbors to the south. And there's been some concern that the property is unkempt, and but for a board that's a vertical board that's missing at the gate, at the meeting of the gates, that will be replaced immediately. We feel as though that area, that part of the property has been well cared for. We don't have a great deal of room in which to plant additional materials, especially overstory types of materials. If
you may interrupt.
Yes, sir.
At the last meeting, one of your neighbors to the east, maybe the only one you have directly to the east, made a point of asking what you will do to visually make their view to the west over that.
Right here.
Right here. Or what
Correct.
will you do there to shield the...
It's a good point. So we spoke to the Nelsons. We've continued to have a dialogue with them. Mr. Schlageter from the club has continued to have that dialogue. We've reduced the paved area that we were proposing on the north side of the existing building by half, to allow for us to landscape this area in a more robust way. And we're going to work that out with the Nelsons, and we're going to come to a conclusion that gives them comfort knowing that that's not going to be an eyesore. One of the things that came up the other night, and it's worth noting tonight, their concern is, well, we're showing, there's lots of notes all over the page, and there's lots of facts and dimensions and all the rest of it, but there's really nothing that speaks to the purpose of that equipment staging as it's annotated. And there's a vagueness to our conversation, my conversation, relative to the public testimony, and I said, one thing we can guarantee is the fact that that staging area is really intended as simply that. It's not intended to be an area of the property that will have noisy equipment sitting on it, nor will it have things that will provide odors or nuisances to the public in any way, shape, or form. It's really capturing space that is part of the property, because currently there's a dotted line that you can see right here. The fence line comes back to the north side of the maintenance building and heads east, but our property line goes all the way to that corner. And so what we're trying to do is simply recapture what is ours, essentially, as it relates to the Village of Wilmette parcel. As we know, the parcel to the north of that is unincorporated Cook County. So all we're trying to do is enable the fence to kind of follow the property line in that corner, in that northeast corner, and in doing so, it enables us to capture the real estate that sits here. It is not our intent to have that become an eyesore or have that become any kind of area of dispute between us and our neighbors, specifically the Nelsons.
So did you coordinated with them and they?
We're in the process of doing that. And so what we're, relative to the ARC, we're coming back with a more site-specific landscape plan, which identifies exactly what's going to be going in that corner. We're going to work with them to come up with a solution that they feel comfortable with. So I'm confident that that's all going to get worked out.
Sorry, go ahead.
In our packets, we have an email from the Nelsons dated January 28th.
Yes, ma'am.
Still objecting to this staging area, loading area. I went out today to look at the site through their eyes, and I was struck by exactly how close their house is to your property. And I was also struck by the fact that this is an area that is currently not utilized and is truly an expansion of the facility in a way that some of the other uses are not. They're occurring whether there are structures and facilities to facilitate them. I have a concern as I look at this that it really does not address their concerns, because they're used to looking at bushes with no activity in the area whatsoever. The vagueness that you talk about in terms of exactly how this staging or loading area will be used is a cause for concern.
Understood. I understand. I made the comment the other night, it's analogous to if I discovered, in this case it's 39 feet, if I discovered that I had a fence across the back of my backyard, but I realized that I had another 39 feet of backyard available to me, I'd want to move the fence and recapture the yard, and not just allow it to sit on the other side of the fence, because it's mine, and I want to be a good steward with it. I don't want to misuse it, but I certainly want to capture it if it's available to me.
Well, can you just move your fence and not put that pavement there? Then you can have your
Sure.
area.
It
Sure.
would reduce the impervious surface requirement.
I would ask my client that question, but we would reduce the impervious surface. We would also use that space in some way, shape, or form to have equipment sit there perhaps during the day, to have golf carts parked there, to shuttle people back and forth, to get some type of vehicle perhaps out of the way while other vehicles were coming in and out of the site. It wouldn't sit there simply as a side yard lawn. I think it would be utilized in some way, shape, or form.
Can I add, and we have the comments, but just to clarify that when this comes before the Board of Trustees, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Roberts, the Appearance Review Commission has to also make its case, had to make its case either positive or negative
Yes,
to
sir.
the Board of Trustees, in addition to whatever we recommend. Is that correct?
The, unless there's a variation granted, the ARC would be the final word on an appearance review certificate, but the approval would be conditioned on having approval from both, or, the intention would be that it would be approved by both bodies.
So I
Yes.
presume that they will focus in on the landscaping.
Yes, that is my
That
understanding.
was their intent as of the other night, as we continued the
Maybe
meeting.
hopefully address the concerns of your neighbor.
That's our want.
Any other?
I guess, like I said, I appreciate all the changes you've made and responded, and I guess how the old maintenance building, that was, you said 60 years ago it was there?
I want to say it's like 61 or 62 it was built, something like
Yes.
that.
And that area you're trying to recapture, you used to have dumpsters there?
No.
No, it was outside the fence. In fact,
Or your last proposal didn't have anything there, or had a?
it did. It had a deeper well there, basically.
With the same use as you're proposing now?
Correct.
Okay.
I will say that the area to the north of the maintenance building, that is,
Oh, I see, I see.
that's unincorporated Cook County, it's utilized a bit by the club and the neighbors on Indian Hill Road who, let's say they have events or the club has unusual events, there's cars parked there. There were disassembled paddle courts that sat on that property for several months earlier or late last year as our paddle court program was expanded. So it's used to a certain degree. It's overflow parking for certain events. So right now, there'll be less of that available as time goes on, and more will be on the inside of the fence if we can manage that.
I guess I don't have as much of a problem with that, because you're talking now about a vehicle that would be there. If you look at it as a residential project, property next to it, they bought the home with that building there. They had to expect something. Not to say that you shouldn't do it, but I think by you setting it back is a reasonable compromise. And I would just say, I'd see maybe an evergreen there or something.
Or several.
Or several.
Yeah,
Just to,
arborvitae or something that is vertical that could block the view completely.
I think that would solve it.
Yeah, that's our hope.
Okay.
So did we let you finish talking about Kenilworth Avenue, and you'd started in on how that's, you'll be dedicating that portion, of right-of-way, but you didn't feel like you had a lot of room for additional landscaping?
I think the additional land, okay, let me address one other thing that we need to be cognizant of as this property gets improved. Stormwater management, which we've talked about as a function of this, there is none today, and we're providing that as this property gets improved. The area to the L-shaped property here is really going to be serve as there are going to be underground tanks, underground pipes that are going to hold water and release it at an appropriate rate into the village's systems once this property is redeveloped. So we have to be sensitive, and we're working with our civil engineers right now, and they will work hand in glove with the landscape architect to make sure that any landscape improvements on the inside of this fence line do not encumber or affect in any negative way the underground stormwater management that's going to be part of this project.
I presume it has to comply with MWRD requirements.
Absolutely. But going back, so I think how we address Kenilworth Avenue, it's a fairly opaque view into the site today. You couldn't put another tree in between these trees. It wouldn't, they wouldn't simply grow because they would be hamstrung by their neighbors. As it relates to foreground plantings, we could maybe do something there, but it doesn't affect any view sheds into the property. So the hope would be that if we were to supplement landscape on the Kenilworth Avenue side, it would occur inside the fence and in a way where we could begin to block some of the views. But the building, given its new height of 15 feet, you won't be able to see it from the street or the sidewalk. The only place you'll be able to see it is from the second floor of the homes across the street as it looks down, and you won't see much of it because it's going to be 50 feet back from the fence line. So as much as I respect the opinions of the Kenilworth Avenue residents, I don't know what it is they would really like to have happen from a landscape perspective. The area, as I said, is maintained and has been planted by the club. It's very well cared for, and will remain cared for by the club, even though it's not going to be the club's property.
Okay.
So it will be it will be cut, and the trees will be pruned, and the trash will be picked up that blows over there, or whatever might happen. Even though it's fundamentally Village of Wilmette Parkway.
Any other
So,
questions?
yeah, absolutely. I want to second the opinions about your responsiveness to all of our issues in terms of setbacks, in terms of height, that kind of thing. And I appreciate that. I appreciate your effort to minimize the amount of paving on that spur north of the maintenance shed. I think that comments about the maintenance of the exterior related mostly to the east side, behind the maintenance building, on the road side of the fence, where it's
Over on the Hunter side?
somewhat overgrown or wild looking.
We can address that.
And I would say that, yes, I agree with you about the trees and the screening effect of it. I think at this point, working with the neighbors on that north and east side is good, and I see on drawing number 6, you had additional plantings to be determined by neighbors on both the west side and that northeast corner. It might help the neighbors' feelings about this, since, yes, there's nothing you're going to be able to do to block their view from the second floor, to pretty it up a little bit with some decorative plantings, shrubs, flowers, whatever it is, along Kenilworth Avenue and Hunter. Make it look pleasant rather than maintenance.
Understood.
That's all.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments for the applicant? If not, are you finished with your
I am, sir, yeah.
presentation?
I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to answer any questions
You can
people
sit
have.
down, and we'll see if others want to speak on this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody would like to speak on this application, please come up and state your name and address.
I guess I drew the short straw here.
Good morning, good evening. I should
Good
say.
evening. My name is Mike Thompson. This is my wife, Deborah. And we've lived in the village for over 33 years. And we own the property at 2305 Kenilworth Avenue in Wilmette. This property is directly across from the Indian Hill Club, the maintenance facility site, which is the subject of this variation request. In November, I presented my concerns before the Zoning Board of Appeals regarding the club's variation request to expand their present maintenance facility and construct two new buildings, several accessory structures, paved parking lot, dumpster pad, and a holding area pad. I indicated at the time that their project constituted an extreme, what I perceive to be as an industrial overbuild for a zoned residential area. I further indicated that the project would undermine, alter the residential character of the neighborhood, particularly without any significant additional buffering of the site to insulate the Wilmette neighborhood from the commercialization effort by the club. It was my feeling then that the club was not being sufficiently considerate of the Wilmette residents in the area. I specifically suggested that the club could downsize or at least move aspects of the maintenance facility expansion to other vacant locations on the golf course property, more to the interior northward and along the golf course's western perimeter adjacent to Locust Road. In reviewing the club's most recent plan for maintenance expansion, I find that while the club has reduced the height of the new buildings and modified somewhat the accessory storage structures, the overall extent of the maintenance facility expansion is not really diminished in size or scope. As presented, the proposed expansion has all the appearances of an industrial site more consistent with the business operations occupying the very western edge of Wilmette along the old railroad line. Granted, the club's maintenance operations cannot be practically distanced from the actual golf course, but I think a more concerted effort by the club could have been given to dispersing some of the maintenance functions to other areas in and around the golf course grounds. Paging through the most recent expansion proposal, it appears that the club still does not understand the need to make some significant effort to insulate the surrounding Wilmette residential neighborhood from the visual impact of this expansive project. I offered some suggestions in October, but with its latest proposal revision, the club has not come forth with any additional buffering or landscape enhancements beneficial to the Wilmette neighborhood. The country club seems to understand the importance of adding additional buffering landscaping to the golf course side of the maintenance facility site, but either does not comprehend or chooses to ignore that Wilmette residential areas to the east and south are just as impacted, if not more so, by their expansion project. I stand in front of my property and look across Kenilworth Avenue, and all I see is a faded and tired old stockade fence. I don't see where that was replaced in the last 2 years. And 4 evergreen trees long in need of regular pruning and nourishment. They're not well tended. They're frail. They're flimsy. It's not a healthy stand of evergreens there. Granted, further to the west, they have planted new evergreen trees along that stretch of Kenilworth Avenue, but there's been no improvement from the gate eastward towards Hunter Road.
So this is what we look at. There are 4 trees were planted over here. There's nothing over here. This part of the fence, as far as we know, it is new. This part is really old. This is what the gate looked like until early today when a man went out to fix it, because they said they were going to fix it, and they did come out to fix it. And this is what it looks like now.
Two slats.
That's the fix. They're done. As far as we know, they're done. And this is what we're looking at. So, and the idea that trees were planted, there were 4 really lovely, big trees were planted, and they're over to that side, to the one side, but there's nothing over here. This is it. This is today. This is what we've got.
It's not appealing, and now you're talking, you can even see above the fence line, even the vehicles that are sitting there today.
This is not the second floor. This is the first floor. We can see the cars.
Now they're going to enhance this and expand operations there. How much more equipment are we going to be seeing in addition to the new structures that are going up? I think they're being just a little bit short-sighted and overly optimistic that the property is adequately shielded at this point in time. There's no, and again, we were at the meeting on Monday, so I don't intend to confuse the issues, but they blend together. And it's hard to differentiate it from where we come from. But there is no extensive landscaping plan that's been presented here throughout this whole process.
Right, they're going to do landscaping on the interior. That's not going to, I mean, it's going to help from our second floor view. There's no question, the second floor view will be improved. But don't, if it's not going to improve, it's not going to improve, but don't say it's not bad, because it's bad.
I fear the Wilmette residential neighborhood will be forever altered in character if this project is allowed to move forward in its present proposed setting. I see no benefit to the village in accommodating the industrialization of this area. What is the village benefiting from this? We don't get anything. There's not going to be an increase in taxation here where we're going to derive more income from a village standpoint, and certainly the local residents aren't being, the property values aren't going to be enhanced by having this close approximation to an industrial area. All the benefits are falling on the country club side of the ledger. The village is exchanging the characteristics unique to a residential neighborhood for more concrete and asphalt, additional industrial structures, and all the noise and pollution naturally inherent with the expansion of a maintenance facility. There simply is no benefit to the village in allowing this project to proceed. I urge you not to allow the Indian Hill Country Club project to proceed under its present format, and would ask at the very minimal that there be some sort of extensive landscaping plan be incorporated and presented to the board before any true assessment can be made as to the appropriateness in allowing this type of variation. We've got photographs, but I think my wife has shown most of them, and you know, anything else you'd like to see, you can drive by. You know, get your own perceptions of it.
I think we've all been there several times, in fact, and we've been inside too. So I appreciate your coming out and expressing your opinion, and I assume you will also come. The Appearance Review Commission is a public meeting, is it not? I assume you attend those and
Sure.
And make your case, because it's really a landscaping issue that you're primarily.
But it blends together. There's interfaces here that can't be.
I got it.
Be differentiated. They flow together, and because we are talking about a transition of a residential neighborhood to a more industrial, commercial type property, we have to talk about it to both groups in the same terms.
Thank you.
And Lisa, this will go back to the Appearance Commission before it would go to the village board?
Probably, I'm not sure when the Appearance Review Commission tabled it to, but it just depends on the timing. Probably, we wouldn't hold this up before the village board for that, but obviously they wouldn't be getting any permits until Appearance Review approved whatever the final plan would be.
Yeah, I'd rather not start the ball rolling down the hill here, though, until all aspects and considerations have been thought about from the Wilmette residents' standpoint.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Very much.
They have pictures, right? They have pictures?
Huh?
They have pictures?
Yeah.
We all
We have
have
pictures
that.
and with the letter
Yep.
that was provided to us. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak? Please.
I'm Joel Boyd. I'm at, my wife Jennifer and I bought the property at 2309 Kenilworth in June. So, and my wife was at the November meeting as well as the meeting Monday. This is my first time at one of these. I'm not as eloquent as her, but she is out of town. And so I'll try not to repeat too much of what Mike said. We're in the property just to the west of Mike's property and Debbie's. We have a few concerns. One is we question whether the club has met the standards to expand the non-conforming footprint. While they've noted that there won't be any additional employees or changes in their maintenance practices, by building extra buildings and having new uses for these buildings, it's inherently an expansion of their non-conforming footprint. We also question whether the club has demonstrated how this project won't diminish property values of the properties nearby, diminish the enjoyment of the property by changing the look, and to Mike's point, changing the character of the neighborhood. In the current setup, it's there's a lot of grass, dirt. They're proposing a lot more paved surface, more of an industrial look, like Mike said. Further, we also question whether the club has really demonstrated that that it would be a hardship as opposed to merely an inconvenience if they were to continue with the current setup. I know it's an old building, and I know they say that they can't renovate or make improvements to the existing structure, but we haven't heard or wondered why they can't tear down the existing structure and rebuild without expanding the footprint in the same footprint that they currently have, with a improved and modernized facility to meet their needs, but without expanding. Our third concern, or I don't know how many that is with the stormwater management. This is a vast increase in the amount of impervious surface, and I know they say they're working with engineers and will use best practices and have a plan to have stormwater management, but there's really no guarantee that plan will be successful. What we do know, is that in the current system, the ground is absorbing the water. We also know that the current Wilmette stormwater system is very inadequate, as why the massive project is being undertaken by the village. And I know they're proposing this sort of a deep tunnel system with the underground pipes. However, there's no guarantee that that's going to be successful, and we point to the deep tunnel system in the city of Chicago, which spent over $1 billion on, and in March of 2018, that system got filled to capacity, and there was still flooding. It didn't really necessarily work. And again, as I said, this is a large increase in the amount of impervious surface on the facility, so that's another concern. That pretty much summarizes it. I did have a question because the proposal still mentioned the sand silo, but the architect did say that is off the table, so I guess we'll take his word for that. I did send some photos to Ms. Roberts. It was fairly late, like 4:30 today, but I have them on my phone if you want to see. I mean, the one thing I would dispute is the, and I do have a photo that shows it's not just from the second floor of the houses across Kenilworth Avenue that, from our first floor, you can very clearly see into the property. This is shot from our first floor. I don't really know how this works, but just put it down.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can, I don't know how I can blow it up here, but that's from our house. No, it's zoomed in, but that's from our house, looking from the first floor, main floor.
That's that existing structure that's there?
That's the existing structure there. So these are all from the, let me go back. So, okay, so this is from the second floor.
Can you turn your phone the other way? So
Yeah,
a
the
little
orientation, yeah, there we go.
You can see it a little more.
All right, so that's a little better. So that's from our second floor. These first three are all from the second floor. And then these are from the first floor, starting here. So those are the evergreens that Debbie referred to. And I think that's about all I have.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hello again, we're the Nelsons.
Good evening.
You've been spoken about a lot today, so now you finally get to see us, huh?
Because we write letters.
And your address, please state it again.
2244 Beechwood.
Thank you.
Our property adjoins to the east. This is the famous view out our bedroom window. We've lived here for 29 years. Just to summarize again, I think we were all together a couple of months ago, and I presume you've all read our 2 or 3 emails and that. So first of all, I guess I should ask you, are there any questions of me or my wife about what we've written
About
to
the
you?
letter.
Do we need to rehash those points at all? You all understand where we're coming from. It's pretty much one of those not in my backyard, literally almost 28.5 feet from my backyard type of issues. So I guess notwithstanding what the great points that the Thompsons and Joe have made about the industrialization and commercialization of the area, I look at the project like this. What things are the club getting? What are they getting out of this? And they're good for the club. They're getting an employees building of 2,500 square feet. They're getting a parking lot for the employees. These are all good things. They're getting new, neat, organized storage bins for their materials. They're getting an environmental building and an equipment wash and sand and pesticide storage for 2,700 more square feet. They're getting concrete pad for their dumpsters. In some respects, they're trying to clean up their act, and I completely understand that.
So aren't they, all that stuff's going on now, from what I understand. Now, it appears that it's being organized in a fashion that it hasn't been
Right,
organized.
well, the 2 new buildings aren't there now.
I understand, but, forget the employee building for a second.
Right.
Everything else is going on there already, from what we've been told.
I believe so. They don't have the concrete structures of it.
Wouldn't it being more organized and having everything in that type of a form be a better view than what's there now, which really is very unattractive?
Unattractive is unattractive. Neatly organized unattractive, to me, is still unattractive. 2 more buildings in my skyline and more dirt piled up in neat rather than clumps is still unattractive.
It's kind of natural
But I understand what you're saying.
as it is now, and there's like some major trees in the middle that we see. Those are gone. They plow down mature trees, mature bushes, replace with asphalt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Go
that's
on.
fine. That's fine.
Go on.
And I'd like to address your issue also that you brought up about the residential property, because yes, we bought a residential property with a big ugly building next to it, and we acknowledge that. We never acknowledged that they were going to expand and park things there and put.
And over 30 years.
You live there, but
Yeah.
they're parking things there now. It's not like it's.
No, they're not parking things where we live. They're parking, everything, maybe this is a point that everybody's missing. All the activity of the club maintenance happens beyond the shed from us. The noise, the movement, the parking, all that happens beyond us. What they're bringing now is they're bringing stuff right next to us. Right there is where they're bringing it.
Beyond you as well.
It's all beyond our view because we've got a 23-foot-high building that's, I forget, 500 feet long, right in front of us, blocking all that. So we don't really object to the sights and the sounds and the smells that may be happening on that side of the building because we at least have a buffer. And there is that building there that shields us from that. It's ugly in the winter, as you can see, but it's not so objectionable in the summer. Anyway, back to what they're getting and what you acknowledge are improvements. What are we getting out of this? We're getting more stuff outside. They're getting 5,200 square feet is being added, yet they need more space to move stuff outside. What about the big building? Stuff is coming out of there. 5,200 square foot of stuff must be coming out of there. Why do we suddenly need more stuff outside the building? And back to the point, why does that stuff have to be outside in the northeast corner where we can see it? Why can't it be on the other side? Why can't it be in the northwest corner, which is technically the back where it's supposed to be, according to the ordinance?
You know, it is on the northwest side, unless you're talking about what they're going to be putting on this driveway here.
On the driveway.
That's what I'm talking about.
Northeast
Yeah.
corner.
That's what we look at right here.
Okay, so that's what you're specifically objecting.
That's our.
What's going to be in the northwest corner?
No, we don't know what's going in the north. Well, we'll see that, but they've promised us trees and we'll hopefully be blocked from that view. That's going to be right way out there. Okay. What else are we getting? We're going to have all those bushes that now block the 23-foot tall building removed. They don't need those anymore. And they don't look too bad sometimes of the year. That's all the red burning bush that you see in that. This is what we see 6 months of the year. It ain't too bad. Yeah, there's a big building there, but it's a nice buffer. Those are all going to be gone, replaced with a concrete pad. We're going to get more noise. We're going to get more distractions. We're going to get more people movement, more beep, beep, beep of vehicles backing up. We're going to get more smells just 30 feet from our patio. Not 100 feet from our patio, but 30 feet from our patio, real close to us. And last of all, just in reading this, they're asking for a variance for every single setback, every single buffer, every single impervious surface, every single non-conforming building, every single additions for the entire site. Isn't there any way to restrict them down to something more logical? Isn't there some way that an area...
From the last plan, from the last meeting we were at to this, I mean, it looks to me like they have responded well to a lot of the suggestions, and they've tried to eliminate, and actually the new setback violations they've created go towards the club as opposed towards Kenilworth.
Yeah, I don't want to tell stories out of school here, but I guess I'll have to. John has never spoken to us. We have never met with anybody other than Dave. Sorry, Dave. And Dave met with Dave. The new changes were not discussed with Dave. We had a phone conversation in which he told me we're reducing the amount of the pad, and we're doing other stuff, moving the buildings 25 feet. So there's not this symbiotic relationship. We're not having coffee 3 days a week to talk about what's in the plan. Never, ever have we met with any of the gentlemen other than Dave. And
Always we initiate.
and we've initiated every
They
call.
don't reach out to us like, oh, we're working with the Nelsons. Wow, that's news to me. And
Yes. And yes, they reduced the size of that pad, not by half, by 40%. But they reduced the size of the pad, but it's still there, and it's still...
And it still requires a variance, and we still have only a vague understanding of how it's going to be used. And I don't understand what the hardship is. I don't understand the hardship of why that particular thing is needed.
And the Thompsons and Joe also brought that up too. What's the hardship here? We thought that variances required proof of a hardship. What's the hardship? Just want to make it look better? Okay, we all want that, but if people are objecting to that, okay, anyway, I don't want to belabor that point.
I think putting the dumpsters on a pad, I think that's a real good thing. I think having dumpsters on Earth is a hardship, so that one, makes sense to me. But some of the others, I guess, because I guess the plan has just been too incomplete. No landscaping, and it just seemed, the vagaries of how this pad will be used, not understanding what the hardships are.
Yeah, even on that point on the vagueness, John pointed out, there'll be no noisy equipment, there'll be no noise, odor, there'll be no nuisance. But he still hasn't told us what's going there. How big is it?
So
Does it have a motor? Does it require backup lights?
Yeah, excuse me, if they, and I'm not saying what they would do, but if they were to not have that pocket, would that be acceptable?
That would help us with our personal objection on the project. It wouldn't help.
We're trying to bring
Right.
the village views and their
Yes,
views.
if we sat down at a table with them and they said, okay, we'll leave it like it is, we'll give up that 39 feet, then fine. Then we just have to worry about the commercialization, industrialization.
Can you tell me, where is that location of that red bush? Relative-
Immediately adjacent to the end of the building.
All of these are.
Can you show me on the?
Yeah, do you want me to
Maybe put that on the overhead?
Show it on this map here.
It is the north side of the maintenance building.
You know what, this is probably a better better.
The existing.
This is the maintenance building. Those red trees
You
are.
see the maintenance building right here, right where my finger is?
Yeah.
That's the corner of where those red bushes are. And they run up and along where the existing fence is. You can see the dotted line there. And they run that whole distance, all the way to the gate.
Thank you.
Okay. One other point I'd like to make, and let's talk about that 39 feet, because we talked about that the other night, and who wouldn't want to add 39 feet to the back end of their backyard? And that's a good point. And we're not saying you can't add 39 feet to the backyard, but we believe that it should be used in accordance with all of the codes. Don't ask for variances on setbacks, on the non-conforming,
Or
on the buffer,
impervious.
on the impervious surfaces to make your 39-foot a good 39-foot for you.
Right.
And from a legal standpoint, I think we have a good point of view there. From a personal point of view, I think I object to the characterization that it's just adding 39 feet to your backyard. It's a 2-acre site in 100 and, what did they say?
2 acres out of 130.
Out of 130. They can give up 1,000 square feet, counting the bushes, 2,000 square feet? Okay. I understand that there's a process where you can recommend this, but with conditions. And if there is, we would ask that you put some conditions on them as to specific uses.
We can do that.
Okay. If you can't, then
Lisa, can we?
We tried before to do it.
that they can't store manure there, that they can't build
I mean, what would be-
tractors there.
So we have the word of these good people behind us that they won't be doing that. And then 2 years down the road, they get new jobs and they're going away. What guarantees do we have going forward that the all of this building and asphalt will be utilized in the way that is set forth today? You know, if it's approved, what, you know, do we have to call the village or sue somebody if they don't honor?
Could you please wrap up your
Yeah.
presentation?
Yes, sorry.
I would
Okay.
appreciate that.
I'll wrap up with two things. We believe that the club has to satisfy the standards for the variances and comply with residential area village standards. And they can't just be nice to us and think that that's good enough. They have to satisfy you guys, they have to satisfy the village and its standards. And the last point I wanted to make was to Mr. Sermon. You made the point about the residential property, I think it was. And yes, it is a residential property, and we bought it with the building there and the landscaping that's there too. And we did not anticipate, obviously, that the property north of that was going to become a part of every day-to-day operations of this operation, nor that all the landscaping would be completely removed. So it isn't the same house that we bought, and if we were to sell it today, we'd have to point out to people that things are going to be changing there, and you might not like them. So.
But that's, it's a complicated issue. I used to be on the Plan Commission, and somebody came in here and said, hey, I bought along the Edens, and there weren't very many cars on the road at that time.
Right.
And this woman brought in the picture, it must have been opening day for the highway. There was one car going each direction, and she said, I don't understand why it's so noisy. And, you bought next to the highway, so
right.
I hate to say it, but you bought next to the industrial type of building.
Right.
And we can only do so much to
Right, but I'll remind you, all this stuff that they're doing back there requires variances.
Yeah.
This is the front of the building, believe it or not. This is the front corner. These are the side setbacks, and they want variations on all of these things in order to do these things that are going to probably negatively impact our property.
And we don't understand the hardship.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very
We
much.
try our best to balance,
And we know, and we
Yeah.
know.
and we're just volunteers.
And if there's no one else to speak on this application, I will give the applicant a chance to respond to whatever they wish.
I'll be very brief. Relative to, just speaking of the relationship that the club has with the neighbor, I have not spoke with the Nelsons, I have not. I've always felt as though it's really Dave's role. He's been the great neighbor to a lot of people that live around this 132-acre parcel. And he's been a tremendous steward of the club in general, and he takes great pride in all this stuff. So we're not entering into this lightly by any stretch. And I think his stewardship of that is reflected in the fact that Monday night we left here at 9:35, 2+ hours of conversation regarding the ARC and their business. And yesterday and today, the fence, which was one of the issues that was brought up, was repaired. He didn't wait a month or 6 months or 2 weeks. He waited 1 day and got it fixed. The fence was installed in 2017. We have a bill of sale that demonstrates the replacement of that fence. So as much as...
Just a question on that, because I remember you asked for a variation. You came to this board and asked for a fence height variation, I believe. Now, I don't know whether that was for that whole stretch on Kenilworth, but 2 years ago, we did approve a variation for a new fence.
Yeah, we replaced the entirety of the fence.
The entire length?
Yeah. So, but relative to, I do want to communicate about the stormwater issue. There are no guarantees in life. The deep tunnel failed because we had extraordinary circumstances in 2018 when that occurred. Had the deep tunnel not been there, it would have really been a problem. I can promise you that the engineering efforts that are going to take place relative to this site are going to vastly improve the stormwater management of not only this site, but its impact on the neighbors, because the water is not going to be leaving. It doesn't all just get absorbed. The ground, the surface of this site is very impervious to a certain degree, and by creating this engineered environment, we're going to capture that water in multiple locations on the site. We're going to store it on site if necessary, if the infrastructure of the village won't allow us to release it, and it will be released in increments that only the village can determine and will allow. So it's going to be better. It's going to be vastly better. And I think finally, the issue of the industrial complex, it's important to understand there's no additional employees that are going to be added at this site. There's no additional equipment. We may swap out a new tractor for an old tractor, but there's nothing new that's coming. It's going to function. Its hours of operation, everything is going to remain as it has for, as Dave just reminded me, 105 years. This has been the maintenance yard for Indian Hill Club for 105 years, predating every home anywhere proximate to this site. So we're simply trying to make it better. And relative to those red burning bush that Mr. Nelson spoke of, they sit here. We pulled this pad back so that those could remain. And we're going to supplement those with other landscape material to improve, because those travel down the north side of this building here, and the ones that are in the corner that were pictured in that image from the window, those will remain in place, and they'll be supplemented with additional landscape. So that's all we have to say. We're not trying to stir the pot. We're trying to make it better for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That I will now close testimony. Thanks. And ask for a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move to recommend granting a revised request for variation to permit the expansion of illegal non-conforming uses, club and golf course, a 25-foot north side yard adjoining a street setback variation for equipment, wash storage, and a 30-foot rear yard setback, double frontage lot variation for a dumpster pad, a 41.37 north side adjoining a street setback variation, loading, special use of three accessory buildings in excess of 200 square feet, 2,028.25 square feet south lot adjoining a street impervious surface variation, a 2,631.1 square foot north side yard variation adjoining a street impervious surface variation, a 2-foot fence height variation, and a variation openness variation to permit the construction of a 1-story employee center, a 1-story equipment wash building, parking lot, and other site improvements at 1 Indian Hill Road in accordance with the plans, the revised plan submitted.
Second.
Mr. Colang, second.
Sorry, the special use to run with the use.
I'm sorry, what?
The special use to run with the use.
Oh,
Missed
okay.
that.
Oh, yeah, the use runs with the use.
Mr. Colang, second. Go ahead, Mr. Sherman.
As I said before, I think they've made a lot of good changes to this by setting the buildings back, lowering the roofs. I think I share the neighbors' concern about the landscaping. They have used this, as they said, for over 100 years. From my experience driving out there, the organization will help a little bit to some degree, because right now, when I drove there in the fall, the dump trucks were backed up to that fence line, and that can't happen anymore. The dump trucks won't fit in that parking lot, so it'll be in a different area. So I think that will help with the view. I think the landscaping could improve. I understand their proposed landscaping, which isn't in this, but to stagger them on either side of the fence makes sense to me. And I think it's really to organize it. That building, I think you said it was, may have said 2,500 square feet. To me, is that about the right size?
50 by 50.
It is 50. Okay, so that is the right size. Okay. But it's got it has a lower pitch or visibility than a 1-story home even. I mean, 15 feet is what we allow for garages. So I think I could support it, but I think there needs to be some attention put towards concealing the existing maintenance building. I think they've done a great job with the existing stuff, the new stuff, but I think the existing building, some way on the inside, if you look adjacent to that existing brick patio, you know, if there were a bunch of evergreen trees there, that would help a lot with the view. I think the view from the first floor of their house or the front yard is important. The second floor, you know, I don't think you can control that. If you've been following the village, you know, they have a PUD. I was at a meeting last night, and the neighbors, they bought adjacent to a commercial property. So it just shows what happens here. You know, it's a little more difficult to understand and accept when it's going along Kenilworth Avenue. I guess I'd like to see the trees increase for the Nelsons in that corner. Maybe that, you know, maybe that area needs to be reviewed. Maybe those are things that the village board would address, and the other issues. I think it really comes down to just the exterior plantings. And, you know, looking at it now, I guess, if we'd known this a couple of years ago that this plan was in place, I would have suggested that the fence along Kenilworth Avenue be shifted in from the property line, maybe 8 feet or 10 feet. And if that fence line shifted from heading to the north, then there would be more greenery before you see that fence, which I think would be a benefit for the neighbors. So I don't know. I know it is an expense to move it, but and you might have to lose those parking lot spaces 5 or 6. But if you were to do that and move it in, then you could really provide nice landscaping on that side. But I'm not here to design the project. Often I try to be, since I'm an architect as well. But I think from what we were presented in November, I think they've made a lot of improvements, really listened to what we said, and now it's down to just details.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with what Bob says. You know, this is a really obvious unique lot. You know, at the time the club bought this, there probably were no other houses around. And, you know, things grew up around it, and, you know, if you wanted to make these changes 30 years ago, probably no one would have said anything. And, you know, just, you know, now, you know, it looks like a lot, but I think you were very responsive to the suggestions that you received at the last meeting. You know, the setback relief you need now is towards the club. Actually, part of the hardship here is, you know, the lot being in what has grown up a residential area around it, and all the setbacks that you have to deal with. And I think you've done a terrific job in doing that, lowering the height of the employee building to 15 feet, getting rid of the silo. I think those are all really positive things which will have positive impacts. You know, and I can tell you, I drive this area a lot. And when I went to look at it the first time, I don't even remember seeing that big building. And I was really surprised when I looked. I was like, yeah, take a look at that. Okay. And particularly in the summertime, you have a lot more foliage out and everything like that. I think the water retention, obviously, you're doing it in conjunction with the MWRD, which, you know, so everything's going to be done in a manner which is, you know, best in whatever today, you know, whatever is the best practices today, that's what they're going to be doing. So, you know, the landscaping, yeah, as you drive down there, but there are a lot of stockade fences in Illinois. In Wilmette, you drive down Lake Street, there's stockade fences. In a lot of other areas, there are stockade fences. And it's kind of what's been there all along. Plus, it's 2 feet higher now than it was before, which obviously is an improvement. So when I take a look at all this, I think it meets the standards of review, and I can support this.
I think I agree with what's been said about the revised proposal being significant improvement over the original proposal. I have not heard anything in the presentations or the response and answer session that justifies the need for this pad on the northeast corner. You have an incredible amount of parking lot in the center part of the site that I think should be able to accommodate any and all traffic that you have on the site. I did go out there today specifically to look at this, and for the first time realized that you had not fenced in this 39 feet and really claimed it, and as a result, it's landscaped in a very dense manner that shields the view dramatically, and something similar should be done on Kenilworth Avenue for the neighbors to the south. Although I think there are a lot of advantages to this revised proposal, I cannot support it because I see no justification for the pad in the northeast corner.
Interesting, yes. Because, I too see that this is an improvement, but I do see remaining issues as it relates to the landscaping. And I would like to see those resolved before we approve this.
I don't know that that's a possibility, unfortunately, unless I'm very much mistaken, because that's the Appearance Review Committee's purview and not ours. It would be nice if it was included in this. I would suggest, when thinking about that concrete pad area, that if the golf club decides that it's in their best interest not to pave that in order to gain our approval, there's nothing that would prevent them from cutting down all the shrubs that the Nelsons are very much interested in and parking stuff there. That would be fully within their rights to do so. There is a lot of parking in the area outside of the fence to the north that I have seen, when I've gone there, employees parking, I'm assuming parking trucks there. I don't think it's the neighbors who are parking pickup trucks there. And I would suggest that the neighbors have talked about the benefits versus the drawbacks. Obviously, the club is not necessarily doing this because they want to benefit the neighborhood. They're doing it to benefit themselves. So that's sort of a given. So what we would like the club to do is to figure out how to make it as pleasant a view for the remaining, for the neighbors as possible. And so that's one of the reasons I had suggested to Mr. Talty that some landscaping outside of the fenced area. You have a beautifully landscaped golf course area. I don't think it's a huge burden to ask to pretty up the exterior of this maintenance facility outside of the fence. And then, the pipes, you talked about the area to the south and west of the employee center in terms of the water storage. Given the fact that it's piping, I think that you could probably arrange it. You could even extend it past the pads for the dumpsters, well to the north, if in order to add some screening on the south side of the employee center, a buffer, right? And I would recommend that. I would also recommend perhaps some screening on the south side of the bins, the storage bins, and the north side behind the sand and pesticide storage building. More is better, it would seem like, in terms of what the neighbors want. And that would help to reduce noise. It would certainly make it appear much more pleasant. And, you know, it's pointless to second what everybody else has said about the changes that were made. And so I think it's just a matter of trying to make this look not like a maintenance facility.
I just wanted to add a few comments. You know, I think our role is to look at the zoning and how that's impacted and make our recommendation. That's all we're doing to the village. I think it's up to the village to make the hard decisions on certain things. And I would think, first of all, with the underground, I mean, we went through all this with Loyola, and they had to work with the county, they had to work with the village engineer, and that's worked out, and it's all documented and everything else. And, you know, the county now has very stringent rules to make sure that there is adequate water. I think when it comes down to the landscaping, I can support this, but I think that the village needs to be the final decision, maybe, not to keep going meeting to meeting. And
Well, the village can make certain requirements.
yeah, so I'm saying they could make those landscape requirements and respond to the neighbors and have more weight, obviously, than us saying, come back just for the landscaping, which we really don't have purview over, correct? So,
Can I add one point of clarification for the benefit of the ZBA?
Sorry.
so that was it, I think, you know. And then with the one last thing, you know, if there's so much focus on that new loading spot next to the Nelsons, I mean, maybe at the village meeting they come and they propose that it's next to the dumpsters. You know, maybe the dumpsters are shifted slightly, and maybe you can gain a spot there that doesn't impact everybody, and that whole issue goes away.
It had occurred to me as well.
Yeah, that might be the better thing, so, you know. But again, I think the village, John, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, they could, you know, once again, I mean, what we heard was that those red bushes and whatever were going to stay there, and the vines or whatever, the foliage along that bigger structure, and it seems to me like it's going to be blocked. I mean, you know, they're reclaiming land that they haven't been using, you know.
And if it was grass, they could just
They
park
could do whatever they wanted to do.
anything there
so,
anyway.
Yeah, they could cut everything down if they wanted to, and that would be okay too.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm not as hung up about that. I don't know that, you know, they've already agreed to reduce the size of that pad and reduce the impact by leaving a lot of the foliage there, which I think is a real positive. I think the fence 2 years ago went up 2 feet in height, which I think is a real positive. I mean, kind of the view that's there is there. It's been there for a long time. I don't personally think it's going to get any worse with what they're planning on doing behind it. Mm-hmm. And to the extent they can do more in front, great. If they could do some in back, great. And if the village board wants to require that, I mean, that's something that they certainly have the purview
to be able to run, to be able, the village board then can respond directly to the residents to resolve the issue and not get it hung up here.
I think there's a material difference between having something as a grass area than having a paved area. Regardless of what activity they may or may not allow on that area. And we are, in fact, granting them a variation for impervious surface so that they can pave that area. And I have heard no justification for that whatsoever.
How large is that paved area?
It's about 600 square feet.
Is it?
That little drive area?
Yeah. About 30 by 20.
This is 20 feet wide. How,
I don't think it's, the one thing though, I think that's a valuable area to store, to have that ability. I don't see it from being an architect, from a functional standpoint, I don't see where they could pick another spot within their current paved area between all the bins and the sand storage. All that needs to be free and open. That's why I think if that space would be next to where the dumpsters are located, I think that would work fine. And then,
Yeah, because they didn't
It wouldn't be-
specify what they needed that
Yeah.
for.
Okay. Anybody else have comments?
And how much was our impervious? It was 2,000, about 2,000 square foot? No.
but they're providing storm water storage to contain all that.
I think part of this, these variation requests, as we know that this is zoned R residential, and as if you, any other use, like this use, obviously requires variations from that. If we recall, Michigan Shores, which is in an R1 district, when they added that outdoor fire pit, they came to us with 65 variation recommendations because the whole complex is not in compliance with R1 zoning. And in part, this is what we're facing here also with these numerous variation requests. I agree with Mr. Kaleng, who said, well, all of this stuff is going on now, but it's in a mess, a big mess. It's a junkyard. And all they're doing is organizing the mess. And based on the comments that were made the last time they were here, they've made great, I think, significant adjustments to move the building, the south, facing south, the employee center, and to move it further, the whole thing further to the north, abutting the golf course. So the stormwater management, they will have to comply with MWRD, just like every other large project has to. They have committed, and the board will bless whatever landscaping they propose. I just think that this proposal makes, I can't help but believe that it makes it more attractive than what there is now. And the use, right now the cars are parked on the south side facing Kenilworth Avenue. And they're parked all over. And piles of dirt and rubble, it is just incredible. And I think this is a massive improvement, and I can support it. Can we take a vote?
Mr. Sermon,
Yes.
Mr. Colang,
Yes.
Ms. Norick,
No.
Mr. Pelleton,
Yes.
Ms. Choka Urban,
No.
Chairman Schneider.
The chair votes yes. So this goes with a positive recommendation to the board, but you've heard comments here today. I'm sure you want to be there. Thank you.
And address some of the neighbors' concerns.
Can you,
Yes, I move to authorize the chairman to prepare the report and recommendation for the zoning board of appeals for case number 2019 Z35.
all in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody else want to speak on any other subject? Being none, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?